The tarot and the zodiac are not external phenomena. They are not out there and should be considered living essences or archetypes within each individual. You are a living, breathing zodiac. The magician Aleister Crowley and the mystic poet William Blake recognized this fact and declared in similar ways that every man and woman is a star. The great German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche penned these words, which aptly introduce and encapsulate the theoretical basis for the entire Taroscopic system. He said, "As long as you still experience the stars as something above your head, you lack the eye of knowledge." Theosophist Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky put the matter this way: when the planets of the solar system are named or symbolized, it must not be supposed that the planetary bodies themselves are referred to, except as types on a purely physical plane of the sevenfold nature of the psychic and spiritual worlds. Now, a taroscopic chart, like any divination chart, is a map delineating the interaction between the conscious and unconscious dimensions of being and the masculine and feminine aspects of the self. However, due to modern society's aversion to whole brain intelligence, the esoteric disciplines once revered by kings are all but deleted from serious concern, being relegated to the level of novelty and pseudoscience. And although there is a plethora of New Age books rolling off the assembly lines, few authors and researchers concentrate on the all-important relationships between the tarot and its sister disciplines, astrology, numerology, and Kabbalah. The divination arts of tarot and astrology are part of the Western magical tradition. They are the result of centuries of in-depth meditation on the meaning of existence, and are a bequest to us from adepts who knew what life is all about. Therefore, in our opinion, the time has come for the Hermetic arts to be presented and taught as the adepts of old intended. This means they must be considered, learned, taught, and practiced as one discipline. This is the message of the first card of the tarot, the Magician. The Magician has laid the symbols of the four suits together on one strange three-legged table. Now, esoterically, the suits represent the four elements, the four hemispheres of the psyche, and the four Hermetic arts. The fundamentally important mysterium of bringing fourness to oneness was encoded into the architecture of Egypt's Great Pyramid, which stands upon a square base and rises to a single point. The pyramid has a foundation of 4 and sides of 3. The magician's table has a square top and 3 legs. Is there an implied connection here? In our opinion, it is finally time for the reunification of science and metascience. The present age is a time for quantum leaps in understanding and discovery. It is certainly time for us to rediscover the true significance of the Hermetic arts. We can dispense with the New Age jargon and reverently employ them as our forebears once did. Old paradigms serve us no longer. They distract us from the great work and from realizing that each man is his own priest and each woman her own priestess. Working with the Hermetic arts initiates us into our true roles. They introduce us to our authentic life path or dharma and help us to see through the illusions that plague inauthentic or karmic modes of existence. For millennia, they have been invaluable signposts for aspirants on the road of self-discovery. It is a special day when the divination arts enter your life. A very special day. It is not by chance that you've been drawn to these subjects. This very attraction constitutes the difference between yourself and the rest of humankind. It means that your guide is working for your best interests. It is offering you protection and wisdom and helping you become immune to the perverse and destructive elements of the modern world. It is leading you from the black squares of ignorance to the white squares of knowledge. It's leading you towards selfhood, the goal of the adepts. The guide is the higher self. It is the voice we must commune with on a daily basis. Originally, this communion was the goal of all mysticism, religion, yoga, and magic. The inner guide may be also described as a living oracle. In the magical tradition, it has been referred to as the holy guardian angel, the Ka, Karast, Christ, and Agatho daimon, or holy serpent. We meet him in mythology in the form of Anubis, Thoth, Mercury, Hermes, Herne, Merlin, and as Christ. The man who is guided from within frees himself from dependency on other people. He never has to seek guidance from the misguided, and hastens instead to attain the kind of life he's meant to live. The enlightened men of the past said that self-realization is necessary before God-realization. At the Oracle of Delphi, the phrase "know thyself" was inscribed. Well, to know oneself means to look into the right kind of mirrors, and the right kind of mirrors are the zodiac and tarot. Previously, we mentioned the importance of the first card of the tarot. Another revelation concerns the esoteric letter of the magician card. The letter ascribed to it is Beth, which means house of God. And although this is a reference to the Great Pyramid at Giza, it also refers to the human body, our own temple or house of God. So again, the message is clear. The real meaning and mystery is not in the cards or the zodiac, but in oneself. As William Blake reminded us, all the gods reside in the human breast, that is, within. We are all fascinated by archetypal mysteries. We can no more abolish them than we can stop dreams coming at night. Everyone knows their own star sign, and we toss coins into water for luck and pick them up for luck. We love games like snakes and ladders, cards, roulette, chess, and hopscotch. We blow out candles at birthday parties and make wishes and so on. It is all a vestige of divination and part of our racial memory. As Madame Blavatsky and Manly Palmer Hall, Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, and others have shown, Western man has become spiritually stark naked because he has chosen to disregard the sacred traditions of the past. Precious gems have been thrown into gutters, so it is really no wonder that modern man is in a spiritually comatose state. Fortunately, we are gradually discovering just how advanced our ancient forebears were. We may delude ourselves about the past, but we can't pretend that the Great Pyramid or the Baalbek stone do not exist. There they stand as vivid reminders of the spiritual and technical eminence of the ancient adepts. However, these adepts did not only create marvels in stone, they were also spiritual architects. They were the creators of the Hermetic arts, which were deliberately designed to assist and guide good men in their spiritual development. They are the means by which one becomes hygienic. The morally and spiritually unhygienic person can make no progress on the road of enlightenment. Time may have passed since the days of the great adepts, but nothing has changed in this regard. The toxic and unsane man has no chance of attaining enlightenment. He can only misguide himself and everyone he encounters. Indigenous people of the earth curiously never proclaimed themselves to be anything like as advanced or civilized as those who preceded them. The tribes we think of as primitive know that great civilizations existed in the past. Sadly, these civilizations no longer exist, and the great adepts who built them are also long gone. But miraculously, their magnificent creations remain. The divination arts are a very special bequest to us from the enlightened masters of old. They are more than just relics of the past to be mocked and ignored. The tarot is immeasurably sacred. It has connections to the Egyptian, Hebrew, Irish, and English magical alphabets, to the Kabbalistic tree of life, to the chakra system, and the alchemical process. It is connected to numerology and to the physical orbit and movement of the luminaries and planets. It's connected to the precession of the equinoxes, to the process of human individuation, the yearly maturation of the human being, to the personality types, the zodiac, the sequence of historical centuries from the 1st to the 21st, to the periodic table of elements, and to several other esoteric and exoteric phenomena. We can say unequivocally that the tarot is the true book of life. There is no other. In fact, when students of alchemy pontificate about the mysterious emerald tablets of Hermes, they fail to realize that it is the tarot to which they refer. Many people develop a superficial interest in tarot. It's one of those subjects that becomes fashionable at certain times. Now there are totem tarots, self-actualization tarots, feminist tarots, art expression tarots, fetish tarots, humor tarots, and so on. Some of these packs do not present the complete deck, and worse, some have added cards. Reduction and addition serve to abolish the numerical integrity of the tarot. To the purist, these creations are not real tarots at all and are misnamed. The tarot is something very specific. It is fine if someone wishes to display or share their own personal vision, their quest or artistry by designing a deck of cards, but unless they're fully conversant with the numerical and geometric construction of the tarot, the book of life, their work does not qualify as tarot. One cannot make tarot subservient to their own mindset and only pay fleeting regard to its age-old principles. So let this be clearly understood. The true book of life has exactly 78 pages and is called the tarot. Moreover, if you examine card 7, the Chariot, and card 8, known as Strength, you will see that they represent the signs of Cancer and Leo. That is, they represent the moon and the sun. The number 78, therefore, symbolizes the coming together or celestial marriage of the luminaries. Now, esoterically, this has considerable meaning. Cards 7 and 8, like the tarot itself, symbolize the nucleation of opposites. The magnificence of tarot lies in its symbolic richness. The tarot communicates by way of symbols, colors, and numbers. The tarot may be described as a master chapter within the great book of symbolism, and we need to be symbolically literate to understand the tarot's profound wisdom. Then we can correctly decode what the cards reveal to us during a reading or a meditation. Symbols have been used by all major cultures, and naturally, there could be no advancement to higher forms of language and communication without them. Whether in the form of hieroglyphics or hierograms, mandalas, and yantras or tankas and sigils, they can only be fully understood with the whole brain and not merely by the left brain's linear circuitry. Scientists studying cognition and communication have discovered that there are at least 240,000 miles of neural threads in the human brain, enough to stretch from the Earth to the Moon. On every micrometer of these threads, there exists 250,000 units of information. This data is, however, recorded only as pictograms or composite images, and not as words. Words are of time, whereas symbols are of eternity. And when you look into your mind and see your own thoughts, it is images that you see appearing before you, not words or sentences. Jews and Christians are prohibited from making graven images of God. The commandment against graven images comes before the prohibition against killing. And we also read that in the beginning was the Word. However, it goes without saying that before the Word of God, there must have been the symbol of God. Words define the creations and exploits of men, not God. In order to know the latter, one must develop symbolic literacy, and studying the tarot is the most apposite way of developing this capacity. As we stated earlier, the zodiac is not out there in space. It exists within. Each person is a living, breathing zodiac. Exoteric astrologers imagine that the movement of the planets and luminaries make prediction possible. This idea has no factual basis. Moreover, conventional astrological systems are very paraphernalia-oriented. The Taroscopic system is esoteric in nature and does not rely on compasses, protractors, computer programs, and complex astronomical charts. Astrology must be based on psychology, not astronomy and trigonometry. If we foolishly believe in an outer zodiac, or in rocks in space affect consciousness and destiny palava, then by definition we also endorse the preposterous concept of predetermination, which posits that we have no free choice. The ancient adepts never taught such nonsense, despite what so-called experts say. The high arts of divination were not originally based on fallacies of this kind. The Magi knew that man is not a passive actor in the theater of the universe, operating in accordance to a pre-written, unchanging script. After all, what does consciousness have to do with physical time? What does it have to do with distance, space, or speed? Each of these phenomena are projections of ego consciousness. They are applicable to physical objects and our perception of the material world. They have nothing to do with the mental and spiritual dimensions of being. Do our dreams occupy a space? Do they take time to cover a distance? Do they come and go at different speeds? Does thought operate according to these four principles? Can thoughts be timed in any practical or useful way? For example, if we suddenly take it into our minds to think of a running horse, we can see that the image and idea of the animal enters our minds instantly. We did not have to wait for the thought to arise as we would have to wait for a physical horse to appear before us. Moreover, a physical horse would have to be transported over a specific quantifiable distance. It would inhabit a space and be brought to us at a certain speed. Nothing of this kind occurs in the realm of thought. It certainly does not occur with the unconscious processes. Once we think of someone or something, the image is there instantly. It appears magically, as it were. In this context, knowing is instantaneous. It is beyond the realm of time. No muscle or machine is required for the mind of man to think or recall a horse, a tree, or a past memory. The mind is not a filing cabinet, data bank, or computer in the accepted sense. The human mind's concepts of its own workings is largely delusional due to centuries of miseducation and conditioning. Our ideas about our own minds, bodies, and souls are artificial and irrational because of perpetual indoctrination. Our ideas about astrology are equally delusional. Astrology has been erroneously based on abstract constructs that have no psychological relevance whatsoever. Although many astrologers use the words archetypal, spiritual, or psychological, their writings often show that they have little idea what these words really mean. The charts they create by means of ephemerae and astronomical computer programs and so on show that they're not working with true astrology at all. It shows that their notion of the zodiac and of divination are delusional. As the philosopher Nietzsche wrote, as long as you still experience the stars as something above your head, you lack the eye of knowledge. Once we understand the wisdom of this statement, we can create or recreate a truly archetypal astrological divination system. First, we must take a closer look at time and realize that there are, in fact, three kinds of time. There is clock time, measured by a clock or watch. There is seasonal time, measured by a calendar. And there is psychological time. This kind of time is different than the physical kinds of time, and it's measured by the zodiac. However, we do not mean the zodiac out there in space. The zodiac we refer to is also psychological or psychic in nature. It is the inner zodiac. It is the living oracle within every man and woman. Of course, the first two types of time are well known. In fact, we're all veritable slaves to them. They're certainly not doubted. But the lost truth is that these first two forms of time originate from the third. This is why they all feature 12 divisions, 12 hours, 12 seasons, and 12 signs. To adhere to the first two forms of time and ignore the third is sheer insanity. It is responsible for the disorder and disempowerment so prevalent in the world. Imagine living for a week or a month without your watch or calendar. Give it a try and see what happens. Your life will be in disarray. Now magnify this to the soul level and see the predicament of the psyche. There it is, afloat on the ocean of existence, lost in the labyrinths of matter without a thread. The universal intelligence did not intend our lives to be this way. It gave us the means to navigate safely through each and every sea and storm of life. Therefore, we will do well to bring the high arts of divination into our lives, because they are the compasses and charts we've been missing. On a very basic level, readings operate like any psychological test. Scientists and behaviorists employ many psychological tests, such as the TAT, or Thematic Apperception Test, the Rorschach Ink Blot Test, the LAB, or Language and Behavior Test, and the Myers-Briggs Test. There are many others that are accepted by academics. For example, for years researchers at Stanford University tried to determine how many psychological types there are. Finally, they came up with 16. Well, curiously, the character cards of the tarot, known as the court royals, which represent the very same types, are 16 in number, and the tarot is centuries old. Basically, the tarot works in the same manner as a common thermometer. When you go to the doctor, he pulls your records and pops a thermometer in your mouth. You give him an opinion about your malady and, hopefully, the correct diagnosis will be made. It's somewhat the same situation when you have a reading. Your record is your horoscope or spread. The chart or cards take the temperature of your psyche, so to speak. That is, of the emotions and the unconscious mind. The ancient adepts were, in effect, the first behaviorists or depth psychologists. Had they been given a free voice, our world and our societies would be free of many repellent elements. The adepts and diviners knew that the stars have no power over our consciousness and destiny. They knew that we contain within us an inner zodiac, or what might be called a living oracle. They knew that this oracle can be accessed by way of symbols, and that, in turn, communicates back to us, back with the conscious mind by way of symbols. This is why the ancient adepts of Ireland, Scandinavia, and Egypt made extensive use of mandalas, hieroglyphs, talismans, and sigils. It is also the reason why the Jewish commandments forbade the making of graven images. Yes, the man in touch with his inner guides cannot easily be dominated and indoctrinated. This is why the establishment has forcibly made words more important than symbols. In the tarot, we find the same principles and elements that appear in the works of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. The terminology of modern adepts is certainly new, but the principles are not original. This is hard to believe for many because tarot scholars have generally failed to explain the true meaning of the cards. For the most part, they have not dealt with the connections between the tarot and the psyche. Nevertheless, the parts of consciousness, the id, the ego, the superego, and the conscience, and the principles of regression, repression, sublimation, inflation, and so on, are all to be found in the Tarot Arcanum. Carl Jung studied astrology, alchemy, and the meaning of mandalas. In truth, there is not a single thing in all of Jung's work that is not in the tarot. The 4 types, the concepts of introvert and extrovert, the anima and the animus, the shadow, the wild man, and so on, they're all there. In this narcissistic age of moral and spiritual decay, we would do well to remember that the most pernicious diseases are not, as is commonly thought, of the body but of the mind. And the tarot is one of the most valid and important therapies to rid consciousness of its sickness. The imagery of the cards has a profoundly positive effect on the mind. Moreover, the tarot enables us to cleanse the emotional body and the deeper layers of the unconscious. Once we are psychically hygienic, we are able to receive and interpret the guidance bestowed by our higher selves. We see reality as it is, rather than what it appears to be to the ego and lower mind. The return to sanity has been a major theme of innumerable psychologists, philosophers, and activists. The men and women of reason have concluded that something is very wrong with post-industrial humanity. Experts have gone to great lengths to describe what is wrong with the way urban man lives. However, they offer little of substance when it comes to coherent solutions to mankind's vexatious problems. This is because man's problems are psychological rather than physical. This presents a major problem for humanity because most men have convinced themselves that what they can't see does not exist. Well, that's a convenient stance for those in denial of the truth. We are now in the 21st century, and the time for problem think is over. It is now time for solution think. It's time for mankind to proactively face reality in order to change it, and to have zero tolerance for the factors that cause the enslavement of the self and the world. This paradigm shift involves the integration of the dark sides of the ego personality. It involves seeing ourselves holistically and completely. And it involves a study of why the ego has irrational ideas about itself and the world. The ego's birth was traumatic. It is nothing less than the ghost that has arisen from the grave of the self. Moreover, the ego came into existence recently. It became the center of a fragmented consciousness. Before the birth of the ego, men enjoyed a consciousness that was whole. This level of awareness is no longer available to most human beings. Indeed, the ego can never comprehend the magnitude of the consciousness that existed before its dominion. That state of awareness still exists within us and is referred to as the unconscious. The unconscious contains psychic personalities, referred to as archetypes. These personalities, so to speak, are regarded by the ego as external objects. They are regarded in the same way as worldly objects. That is, the ego does not regard the excluded content or archetypes as part of itself. This is because the ego is extremely defensive, so much so that it has banished vitally important aspects of its own nature. The tarot and the divination arts helps us to open portals of communication between conscious and unconscious hemispheres of mind. As the stained glass windows of a great cathedral filter raw sunlight, the 22 Arcanum filter, as it were, the energies of the unconscious, so it can be of use to the ego. Light that is too direct can burn and desiccate a garden. But when the light is directed correctly, and when its intense rays are properly diffused, the garden yields many a fragrant tree and flower. Well, so it is with the garden of the mind. Astrological charts and tarot spreads map the rites of passage that each human being must experience during their lives. There is no way to avoid these rites of passage. We could not avoid being born, and we cannot avoid death. We cannot avoid the other rites that occur between birth and death. We can, however, know a great deal about them. We can find out when they will happen, and we can prepare to navigate them correctly. This is the choice of sane men. When we successfully negotiate the challenges that arise during the rites of passage, we pass from the horizontal plane of our limited ego life to the vertical plane of selfhood. We transcend karmic existence and become one with our dharma or true life purpose. The average person will experience approximately 7 major rites of passage during their life. The more awakened person can have more, and the symbolically literate, self-realized person's life may be considered one continuous rite of passage. Either way, as we said, the rites cannot be avoided. Psychologically speaking, they are unavoidable stages of maturation. They can be times of emotional transformation and spiritual revelation. During a rite of passage, we often encounter resistance from authority figures and can be forced to deal with strange inner compulsions that disturb our equipoise and compromise our domestic and social security. For most people, the rites are usually experienced as uncomfortable and even alarming deviations from the sunny horizon sought by the ego. They are interruptions in the routine or punctures in the bubble of normality, which is anything but. Due to these detours and periods when the wires become crossed and frazzled, we can find ourselves doing very strange things. The rules of the game evaporate and even appear grotesque, and the advice of other people is about as useful as a signpost in a ghost town. The obvious rites of passage have been recognized by mainstream psychologists and philosophers for some time now. They may include birth, entrance to school, puberty, leaving school, the first sexual experience, the first job, a marriage, giving birth, the loss of a parent or a similar significant trauma, the astrological Saturn return, as it's called, divorce, menopause, retirement, and death. There are many others, such as moments of betrayal or punishment for misdeeds and so on, not to mention the various euphoric experiences of a creative, religious, or mystical type. Now, each person's ego life has its own particular rhythm, movement, and duration. That unique rhythm and complexion is revealed in our birth chart. The more unique a person's character, the more unique their individuation process will be, and the more distinctive the rites of passage leading to the final stages of life. The final stage, known to psychologists as the individuation, was known to adepts, mystics, and alchemists. They frequently used the symbols of a cross, a square, or a cube to connote this stage. They also referred to it in their writings by the terms quartering and quaternity. Reaching the final stage of the great journey brings one to the cube throne, or great ashlar, In the art of ancient Egypt, we see the god or pharaoh seated upon a cube. In the Christian tradition, we hear of the crucifixion of Jesus upon a cross. We read of alchemists and the process known as the squaring of a circle. We hear of the prophet Ezekiel and his fourfold vision of God. We see the square turning up in the 4 cardinal points of the zodiac. It has been subtly incorporated into the designs of the major arcana in the same manner as it has been on yantras and mandalas. Wherever the symbol of the square is found, in the arcane tradition, it symbolizes consciousness becoming whole. Working with the divination arts allows us to upgrade our intellect, imagination, and perception. When our psyche is hygienic and operating from a high frequency, we move with greater speed towards our dharma or authentic life purpose. We're also protected against the many negative influences and viral messages that pour in from the world to besiege the mind and make us toxic and insane. Today, most people are massively overstimulated by the stuff of the world. Their minds have been overwhelmed and their critical faculties are frozen. In the place of reason, we have faith and belief. But faith and belief do not contribute to the healthy progress of civilization. On the contrary, they bring about the fall of civilization. Many people think the magical arts have little to do with reason. This is not true. This notion is common only because irrational charlatans have abused the esoteric arts. The divination arts are essential for proper intellectual development. They involve number, symbolism, color, and geometry. They involve astronomy and psychology and provide us with the deepest insights into the nature of man. They should be employed in our everyday lives and are as valuable as physical maps and compasses. They are certainly as valuable as any living guide or counselor. If you work for another person, you are fundamentally disempowered. This is a fact. If you're not permitted to make decisions in a relationship setting or practice the religion you choose, or play the music you desire, or dress your own way, or be with whom you wish, then again you are disempowered. If you're out of your center, disconnected from your core nature, vulnerable to the influence of others, then you are disempowered. The world is your master, and the misguided are your guides. The man who knows he's here for a higher purpose, but who chooses to do nothing about it, lives in perpetual frustration and anxiety. He becomes dependent on other people in the same mess. Of course, it is true that many good people find it difficult to provide for themselves materially. Although they may know what it is they do not want to do in life, they may not know what it is that they should be doing, and waste years trying to find out why they're here and what they're meant to do. They would give anything to have guidance and finally end their dilemma. Most people in this predicament rightly discover that what they've been told by parents and teachers is just not true. They know that going to school to get good grades has not fulfilled them. They know that jumping through hoops to fit in with the status quo is ultimately unsatisfying. They know that there's a big difference between life and lifestyle, and recreation and vocation. They know there's a difference between the inauthentic and the authentic life. Some come to realize that success in one area of life does not mean success in another. The man who gives these matters deep thought realizes he is not alive to simply labor for other people and become yet one more oppressor. He knows his dependency on the world must end if he is to be his own person and truly progress. Of course, the answers to man's material predicament are really quite simple. Life can be compared to a business, and in a business, one sure way of getting ahead is to hire good staff. In any successful corporation or enterprise, we're bound to hire specialists, agents, representatives, human resource managers, and financial accountants, and so on. So let us consider what would happen if we were able to hire 78 professionals to work for us every day. What would happen if we had 78 experts at our disposal? And what would happen if each expert had at least 10,000 years of experience and worked for 24 hours without needing a break? What would happen to our business if our team were 100% loyal and if their work was of the highest professional caliber? And to top it all, what if they exacted no wage or salary for their contributions? With personnel like that, what would be the odds of our success? Well, there are already 78 professionals at your beck and call every time you lift a tarot deck off the table. What, for instance, would happen if you had a family of 78 members, each working in complete unison towards a common goal? Would this not be a force to be reckoned with? Well, although it may sound strange, the 78 archetypes of the tarot are our family members. They represent aspects of our own being. It follows that we need to get in contact with this archetypal family as fast as possible. In each of us there exists a living oracle made up of 78 facets or archetypes. And this oracle can be consulted. It can provide us with the answers we need on any subject. The oracle provides the direction we need to excel and succeed in all areas of life. To ask any other source for our answers and guidance is nothing less than an act of blasphemy. So we can see that the disempowerment we experience exists for a reason. It is the direct consequence of our refusal to consult the archetypal intelligence within our own being. It exists for a reason, and there's something we can do about it once we realize the truth of the matter. The tarot is an external oracle that represents the internal one. The arcanum are an archetypal alphabet. They're a language we must learn in order to communicate with the living oracle. Once we open direct counsel with the living oracle, we get our answers. We begin to find out what life is all about and receive the instructions we need for our welfare and success. We get the protection, security, and empowerment we erroneously believe comes from other people in the world. The world's written history has been tampered with by the despotic plutocratic forces that have kept humankind in servitude for millennia. This fact is known to the men of intelligence. As the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau once aptly wrote, the falsification of history has done more to mislead humans than any single thing known to mankind. And let us not also forget Voltaire, who wrote, "History is the lie commonly agreed upon." Fortunately, words conceal many secrets about the past. An examination of the original meaning of certain words gives us insight into history. When it comes to written languages, such as English, we find it is mostly the vowels that interchange over time. Generally, consonants remain as they are. Moreover, ancient written languages such as Greek, Egyptian, and Hebrew did not commonly use vowels. Bearing this in mind, we can learn a great deal from a study of the word tarot. The word is primordial. During the early dynasties, the supreme mother goddess of Egypt was known as Tarut or Taurt. As time passed, she became known by other names such as Nuth, Mat, Maya, Hathor, Isis, Serke, and Sophia. In later times, she became known as Mara or Mary, from Meri, meaning beloved. That is right. The original Madonna was Taurt. From her name, we derive terms and names such as Ishtar, Ashtaroth, Astarte, Star, Tara, Tiamat, Thoth, Taurus, and so on. The word tartan is a derivation of her name, and so is the derogatory slang word for women, tart. Members of the solar cult demonized and rebuked members of rival cults. A worshipper of the stellar goddess Taurt was ridiculed and scourged as a tart, in the same way that a worshipper of the lunar goddess was ridiculed as a lunatic, a monster, or a sinner. Other defamatory words used in the Bible is harlot. This word originally came from Herodulai, which actually means sacred woman or beloved one. There are many such mistranslations of this kind in the scriptures. The word Tarut was later pronounced with a soft H, like Taruth, thus giving us the familiar word truth. The word tarot and the word truth, therefore, have the same meaning. It follows that if one is seeking truth, to seek out the tarot. In Arabic, the root ta means hidden or secret knowledge. In Anglo-Saxon languages, the strong T sound was softened to ch or ch, so tarut becomes charuch or church. A church is obviously a place of worship. However, the actual church is not a building. It is the tarot. The goddess name Circe is also a derivation, as are the words Turk and Kirk. Kirk means church in Scots Gaelic. The name Circe is the origin of the word circle. This is an important clue pertaining to the divination arts of tarot and astrology, because the zodiac is always depicted as a circle in the heavens. And likewise, tarot cards are often laid out in a circle. The word thought has its root in thoth, which has its root in tarot. The word thoth means a college, and that is what the tarot is, a veritable college of the mysteries. The word taught comes from tarot, and so does the word throat. In Celtic countries, this word is often pronounced throat. The word Torah is a derivative of tarot. Torah has come down to us to mean law or way. But when we do our homework, we find out that the Bible originated from the Torah. However, the lost fact is that the Torah originated from the Tarot, the original book of sacred law. This is one of the reasons why in the major arcana, card number 2, the High Priestess, holds a scroll bearing the word Torah. This word does not refer to the exoteric Torah, but to the hidden or secret doctrine of the adepts. The priestess represents the goddess Ta'urt, that is, Tarot. It is therefore her own name that we see written upon the scroll she holds. The scroll also refers to the zodiac, which was known as the Scroll of Life. In Hindi, the word Toran means gateway. This is interesting because that is just what we see in Arcanum number 2. The priestess sits in front of a portal leading to the Tree of Life. The number of the card, 2, figuratively connotes the temple pillars or gateway. This subtextual message in this card is that the High Priestess is herself the portal to the mysteries. Of course, we understand that she represents Isis or Ta'urt, that is, the starry heavens. The word ratio may also derive from tarot. Ratio means measure, relationship, harmony, and order. The goddess Ta'urt is depicted throughout the major arcana. We can see her in cards 2, 3, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 21. It is interesting to note how the female figure was, in many decks, replaced with male characters. This travesty can also be found in relationship to the signs of the zodiac. Particularly in the case of Libra, Aquarius, and Sagittarius, we find the original feminine imagery obscured. In each case, the major arcana preserves the true imagery and correspondence of the astrological signs. The name Tarut was known as a goddess epithet far outside Egypt. In Ireland, to which the Egyptians traveled, we have the word commemorated in Tara, the capital and seat of the kings. Moreover, Tara is situated in the 5th province of Ireland, that was called Meath or Meath. This word may also be akin to the goddess named Maat, who was an early version of Ta'urt. Indeed, it is not improbable that the Egyptian pantheon originated in Ireland. In any case, the goddess Maat was connected with the concepts of law and justice. And interestingly, in this context, County Meath was the central administrative centre where the kings or chieftains gathered to hold council. It is also suggestive that the area around Tara contains many tombs in which Irish queens lie interred. The symbol of Maat, the goddess of justice, was the great scales. We can still see the image of the lady with the scales over modern courthouses. Although the architects have given the goddess a Grecian appearance, she was native to Egypt and Ireland long before the rise of Greek and Roman culture. Maat was also connected to balance, fairness, and division. The hierogram for her name was akin to our modern fraction, a half. This may be the reason why the scales of Maat appear as the symbol for the sign of Libra, which is halfway through the zodiac, the halfway point of the 12 signs of the zodiac. In any case, the root ma, M-A, turns up in many other words, such as mother, matter, matrix, mate, matrimony, marriage, middle, master, math, measure, matriculation, and so on. In Sanskrit, the word Tara means woman and also star. Well, curiously, Arcanum number 17 which is known as the star, depicts a female. Above her head, the artist painted a large star, connoting Sirius. According to the etymology, then, this female goddess figure with the star above her head can only be the goddess Ta'urt or Tarot. If you go to the text tour, to the pages entitled The Egyptian Origins of the Tarot, you will see our explanation of each card's particular imagery and numerology, and how each card of the major arcana relates directly to a definable aspect of Egyptian cosmology. The analysis we present clears up once and for all the quandary concerning the origin of the tarot. Now, the ultimate question asked by believers and skeptics alike concerns how the tarot and zodiac enable prediction. How do they provide insight into questions concerning character, personality, vocation, and destiny? This question has not been sufficiently dealt with by most writers. The answer should be known to those within the cognitive sciences, to behaviorists and psychologists. Unfortunately, most specialists in these fields are not that interested in occultism or divination. This is the reason why the truth about the divination arts has hitherto not come to light. In order for tarot and astrology to work and yield results, they must be connected to consciousness. In fact, we cannot understand the nature of the tarot or the zodiac without understanding something about the origin and evolution of consciousness. We humans possess an inner sense of knowing. Some have called this sense intuition, some the still small voice or guardian angel. Others call it the God force. Skeptics are more inclined to call it instinct, but nevertheless they cannot doubt that in certain important situations some kind of superordinate intelligence kicks in for our protection. Regardless of the epithets and terminology, if this force does indeed exist, then we need to find out how it came into existence, how it operates, and how to get into direct communication with it. The Taroscopic system rests upon these three questions or themes which go directly to the heart of the connection between the divination arts and human consciousness. Revealing the connections between the tarot, the zodiac, and human consciousness is best explained by way of numerical analogy. Originally, consciousness was merely a primitive sensory mechanism. The neocortex did not exist, the mammalian brain did not exist, and thought as we know it was non-existent. Consciousness, for want of a word, was at a rudimentary or primal stage. The cerebral spinal system was then a single fragile ganglion. It is from this rudimentary stage that we have inherited our understanding of oneness. However, this stage, the first stage, itself developed from a more rudimentary stage, that of nothingness. And this protean, uroboric, pleromic state is numerically denoted by 0. Of course, no one can conceive or point to something that is actually nothing. Nevertheless, we do have the concept of nothingness within our minds. This nothingness was often symbolized by the waters of the primordial abyss and by creatures such as the snake, crocodile, and reptile. Other so-called demonic creatures have been used to connote this primitive stage. We still use terms like reptilian and mammalian to connote the early cognitive stages of consciousness. The single ganglion, or rudimentary ego, was oriented towards the inner world of the id, that is, towards the unconscious realm. We can imagine it, as the Egyptians did, as a single infinitely delicate petal upon a single lotus or papyrus stem, rising from the waters of oblivion. From this stage of singularity there arose a secondary apparatus. This was to furnish a center that could respond to external phenomena. With the advent of this ganglion, we have the primal bifurcation pictorialized in the world's cosmogenic myths. This act of primal scission is cryptically described in the book of Genesis. It is also depicted in myths that deal with the dividing waters or luminaries. In these myths, we read accounts of light separating from darkness, heaven separating from the earth, the sun dividing from the moon, and the male dividing from the female. In mythology, there is also the recurrent motif of the twins. In Egyptian mythology, we read of the evil Set and his good twin Horus. In the Old Testament, we have the tales of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, and Christ and Satan. In Sumerian mythology, we hear tell of Enlil and Enki. In the Arthurian legends, we have the story of Arthur and his Mordred. We have Sir Balin and Sir Balan, and Tristan and Mark. And in the legends of Scandinavia, we hear of Odin and Loki. In Celtic legends, we hear about the fair and dark sisters. When consciousness developed to the bicameral stage, we gained an understanding of two-ness. The entelechy continued through the centuries. From the stage of two, like a fleur-de-lis, there arose a third apparatus, which had the job of administration. It served to process and synthesize the experiences of the two antecedent ganglion. After the advent of this third ganglion, we developed an understanding of threeness. And at this stage, consciousness rested for a time. The third stage of consciousness was relatively stable. The titanic and threatening forces from within and without, which assaulted the vulnerable ego, were kept somewhat at bay. This is why threeness is considered an archetype of harmony and beauty. Traditions and doctrines which feature or exalt threeness, such as the Christian tradition with its Trinity, relate to earlier levels of consciousness. Eventually, from the third stage of consciousness, there came a new stage, the fourth. This stage of consciousness is the one experienced today. Of course, the earlier stages are not gone or forgotten. We experience each stage simultaneously. Modern consciousness is an amalgam of all the previous stages. The fourth level of consciousness is symbolized by the number 4, and by anything that is fourfold, such as the cross, the square, and the cube. Interestingly, we see these symbols turning up in the iconography of every nation and tribe in the world. Fourness is synonymous with order, security, stability, and manifestation. Competent psychologists know all about the 4 hemispheres or modalities of consciousness. Carl Jung named them the intuitional self, the rational self, the emotional self, and the sensational self. As we said earlier, the 4 objects on the magician's table represent these 4 hemispheres of consciousness. Of course, they may even represent the 4 stages of ascent. In any case, Arcanum number 1 depicts the anatomy of the psyche. This is one reason why the cards of the tarot are so enigmatic and captivating. The tarot's images ultimately reflect the content and nature of our own minds. Arcanum 1 represents the unification of consciousness. So does the symbol of the crucified man. So does the image of the pharaoh seated upon the cube. The unification is referenced by images of Osiris with his 4 sons, by the 4 evangelists, by the Joker with his colored clothes, by the 4 directions of the Native American Indians, by the swastika of the Aryans, by the 4 arms of India's dancing divas, and by the crossed legs of Krishna and Shiva. The square is to be found on many tarot arcana. The triangle and the square have been skillfully incorporated into the designs of several cards, such as the Emperor, the Chariot, the Wheel of Fortune, Justice, the Hanged Man, Temperance, Judgment, and the Universe. Mythographs of a man dying on a cross or hanging from a tree represent consciousness at the 4th stage. Mandalas and other examples of sacred art commonly employ 4 colors or directions. Again, they are 2-dimensional representations of human consciousness. The Pyramid at Giza is particularly fascinating in this regard because it is, in fact, a 3-dimensional rendition of the same idea. It is literally consciousness in stone. The Christed men represent the next step in the phylogenetic evolutionary process that we have briefly described. They represent the so-called 5th element, or quintessence. This is why the number 5 is often associated with mastery, progress, and enlightenment. Popes and bishops wear pentagonal headdresses. Jesus had 5 original disciples. he broke the 5 loaves, and so on. In the occult world, the 5-pointed pentagram is often seen. For example, the magician stands within a pentacle, or wears one about his neck. Students of art and architecture will be familiar with the drawings of Vitruvius, Agrippa, and Leonardo da Vinci, depicting the Anthropos standing in the shape of a 5-pointed star. These artists were figuratively depicting the future state of consciousness. The establishment technocrats of today's world, as well as other more elusive personages, are obsessed with reaching the 5th dimension. Like the great adepts, they too rightly understand that man's present level of communication is pretty impaired and limited. They too employ the symbol of the pentagram and other symbols which are based on the number 5. They expertly incorporate the number on their literature, logos, and emblems, as well as in the commercials and edifices they fund. If you proceed to the text tour, to the page entitled The Fifth Element, you will see some visual examples of corporate symbolism relating to the number 5. The technocrats erroneously believe that the quintessential stage of consciousness can be artificially actualized. They believe it can be reached by way of human effort and technology. Many occultists throughout history have entertained this false notion. The men who fund the sciences truly believe that by way of technology, carbon life forms can progress to the 5th stage. They have established the present technotronic age to further their dubious agendas. They dream of the organic computer and the post-human world. They look forward to the perfectly controlled global village in which cybermen and androids replace problematic humans. They use the symbol of the pentagram to represent this cybernetic New World Order. And they've spent billions on various necromantic experiments and on the many think tanks and technical corporations that work to bring the technotronic dystopia into being. These corporations and organizations include Sun Microsystems, Microsoft, Apple, Xerox, Intel, Xilinx, NEC, MIT, CIT, SRI, NASA, the Hoover Institute, the Pentagon, Laurel, and Genentech, and so on. Of course, man cannot artificially evolve. It is the universal intelligence that guides the development and fate of humanity. The ego may continue meddling in technology, but it will not achieve success, because no amount of technical tinkering can induce the 5th stage. All it will achieve is the destruction of the present state of consciousness. A close examination of the state of decay in today's world confirms this point. As the ancient adepts knew, only the hygienic mind can progress to the 5th stage. The hermetic arts of divination that they created assist in the detoxification process and pave the way to the quintessential level. A toxic heart and mind perceive reality in a distorted way. A toxic mind creates a toxic world. It can't perceive holarchy and can't see reality for what it is. The toxic or sociopathic mind sees the world in its own image. The hygienic man is depicted on the first card of the major arcana. He is the true magician who understands that the pentagram represents the organic process towards self-realization, not the technological one. The bifurcation and organic development of human ego consciousness was a process known to the ancient Magi. If we examine the intriguing plates of the Papyrus of Hunefer, also known as the Judgment Scene, in the Book of the Dead, we will see images that serve as cryptic depictions of the phylogenetic evolution from the first part to the 5th. This so-called Judgment Scene is very sacred and enigmatic and has been completely misunderstood. Moreover, the so-called Book of the Dead was originally entitled The Book of Coming Forth by Day. This title clearly refers to the negentropic ascent of consciousness. In front of the pharaoh, rising from the waters on which his cubic throne rests, we see a lotus or papyrus shoot. The shoot rises as one then clearly bifurcates into two, then further divides into three, and upon the three petals we see the final four. Then, to emphasize the connection to consciousness, the four sons of Horus, or Osiris, are shown standing upon the lotus. They are the final outgrowth of the plant of consciousness. These four sons are called the guardians of the directions, the cardinal points. They are not depicted as life-size for the simple reason that they're not meant to represent sons of a physical type. They are archetypes. They represent the four psychic hemispheres within the being of every man and woman. This famous papyrus, then, depicts, among other things, the origin and development of the human psyche. The secrets of the psyche were later rediscovered by psychologists such as Sigmund Freud and Carl Gustav Jung. In short, the pharaoh is the fifth element. He sits above the throne of four. He is the result of all that comes before. The antecedent stages may also be described as the mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. In this sense, the pharaoh transcends them all. He is the risen one, the quintessence or meta-human. This is the reason why he has his arms crossed in front of him. He is the quartered or crucified one. Interestingly, a cube, when opened up into its planes, makes a perfect Latin cross. Seen two-dimensionally, a cube describes a perfect hexagram or Star of David. So we ask whether there is any real difference between the image of Christ quartered on Calvary and the pharaoh quartered on his cubic throne. Are we not dealing with one cosmogenic story, regardless of the prosaic embellishments? We should now understand that the consciousness has risen through four great stages. Although this process occurred sequentially, the antecedent levels of development are not lost or forgotten. They remain intact today. This means that consciousness operates on each of the four levels simultaneously. Each level is essential to the others. Once consciousness arrived at the fourth level, it gained a semblance of psychic and physical security which it will not easily relinquish. To understand why the tarot and other divination arts work, we must understand something about the third and fourth stages of consciousness particularly. The numbers 3 and 4 were very important to the ancients. After all, there is a reason why the Great Pyramid was made from squares and triangles. Those shapes were incorporated for good reason. The architects of the pyramid knew that they were constructing a stone replica of human consciousness. To stand within the Great Pyramid is to stand within a three-dimensional simulacra of one's own mind. And this is the reason why people have uncanny experiences inside the structure. It explains why certain structures of this kind apparently carry curses. Actually, there are no curses per se. It's just that these structures are based on perfect proportions and harmonics, which cannot easily be violated by toxic energy. The human body has its antibodies and defenses, and so do sacred structures and precincts. Strangely, consciousness chronicles its own genesis and journey. The story of psychic progress is subtextually recorded in the world's various myths and legends. The scholar Joseph Campbell had an inkling of this. In his writings he refers to the hero of 1,000 faces. Perhaps he understood that the great solar hero, who turns up in many myths, represents the human ego. The ego is the hero, the champion of mythology, who slays the monsters of the deep, who rises to the peak of success, and who finally descends into oblivion. The cards of the tarot also depict the great journey of becoming. Presently, the ego is at the fourth stage. This fourth stage is an outgrowth of the three previous stages. And, as we said, consciousness operates on all four stages at once. Consciousness is also able to combine the stages to expand its power. To use our numerical metaphor, the 4 can combine with 3 to make 7 or 12. The first, second, third, and fourth stages can combine to make 10. Interestingly, the symbols for addition and multiplication are crosses. Symbolically, the cross not only represents the number 4, but also the number 10, as in the Roman numeral, the X. The reason why fourness plays such a large part in our world is because it is a category of consciousness. Fourness plays a large part in the divination arts of tarot and astrology for the same reason. If something exists within the mind of man, we can be sure to find it in the world of man. And if you go to the text tour page entitled The Fourth Phase, you will see many examples of how the archetype 4 turns up in our lives. If we add the digits that make 4 in the Pythagorean manner, we discover an important secret about the nature of consciousness. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. And 10 is the perfect number, and it is symbolized by the cross, or the X, which is itself a symbol of consciousness. Now we understand why there are such profound similarities between the Egyptian and Christian mythologies and iconographies. In Egyptian art, we see the pharaoh quartered. His arms are folded in the shape of a cross. He sits upon a cubal throne. In Christian art, we see Jesus on the cross, spread out to emphasize the quaternity. On either side of his cross are two others, while 3 times 4 equals 12. As we said, 12ness is also an important mental category. The name of the first god of the first dynasty of Egypt is Atum. This is where we get the word Adum. The Hindus have their Atma or Atman. Additionally, the Egyptian Aton and the Phoenician Adon and the Grecian Adonis and the Nordic Odin are renditions of the same deity who represented the first cause. We also get the word atom from the primordial atum. Greek philosophers, such as Zosimus of Panopolis, identified the letters of Adam with the 4 elements. And he was right. Esoterically, the letters do indeed correspond with the 4 psychic elements or hemispheres. Numerologically, the word atum is extremely interesting. Its letters, amazingly, are 1, 2, 3, 4, which equal 10. Now the word Adam gives us 1, 4, 1, 4, but that also equals 10. One of the reasons why Adam is 1, 4, 1, 4 is partly because of the human hands. That is 1 thumb and 4 fingers. 1 thumb and 4 fingers. 1, 4, 1, 4. If you consult the text tours page entitled Division of 10, you will see illustrations that help explain the points we're making. We only have to examine the religious art of the world to see how often heroes, saints, and deities are shown in close proximity to squares, triangles, and crosses. The gods Aton and Adon are the basis of the Jewish Adonai or Jehovah. Interestingly, Jehovah's name is spelled with 4 sacred letters, the Yod, He, Vav, He. The word pyramid is supposed to be derived from fire, thus signifying that it is the symbolic representation of the one divine flame, the life of every creature. John Taylor believes the word pyramid to mean measure of wheat, while Piazzi Smith favors the Coptic meaning a division into 10. So says Manly Palmer Hall in his book The Secret Teachings of All Ages. The pharaoh's crossed arms are also an ideogram for the division of 10. This is because 10, or Aten, is man. The pharaoh represents the human being who has ascended from the lowest levels of consciousness to the level of the meta-human. There are several other examples of this mathematical and geometrical premise, the division of 10. One is Moses coming out of the holy mountain in Egypt with the 10 commandments. Of course, there are 2 tablets with 5 commandments on each, hence division of 10. And the sacred mountain is not Sinai, but the Great Pyramid, the real holy mountain in Egypt. There are several stela and cylinder seals from Mesopotamia depicting a king seated, like the pharaoh, within an enclosed precinct on a cube-shaped throne holding the ring and rod. These 2 emblems represent royalty and also the unification of opposites. Specifically, they represent the union of the feminine and masculine polarities. They also represent the division of consciousness, the division of 10. After all, the number 10, 1, 0, is quite literally a ring and a rod. If you go to the text tour page entitled Division of 10, you'll see the relevant illustrations. Early carvings show the goddess Lilith with her arms symmetrically divided, with each hand grasping the ring and the rod. In Irish iconography, we see Herne, the forest god, sitting in a yogic asana, holding a long coiling serpent, a rod, in his left hand and a torque or a ring in the right hand. The Irish Herne was the prototype for the Grecian Hermes, god of healing, magic, and wisdom. Today we are accustomed to seeing a magician or conjurer holding a wand and a ring. That ring is often shown as a top hat. From that hat or ring he pulls an endless supply of paraphernalia. This is to symbolize the feminine womb, which teems with life. The magician's hat or ring is the womb symbol. The magician's wand or rod symbolizes the inseminating phallus of the male. Modern computer language employs the same ring and rod symbols, the 1 and the 0. These are occult sigils, and they represent intelligence of every kind, be it digital or organic. During the Renaissance, and even before, artists and architects depicted Adam with his arms divided to form a fourfold iconograph. This image was painted by the architect Vitruvius, by artist Leonardo da Vinci, and by occultist Cornelius Agrippa. These masters knew that the 4 and the 10 represent the ascent towards illumination. They knew that the number 10 represents spiritual androgyny. It represents the chemical wedding, that is, the unification or nucleation of opposites. The most important numbers arise from the multiplication and addition of the primal tetrad and its factors. From addition and multiplication of 3 and 4, which were the latest stages of consciousness, we get 7 and 12. No one involved with the subjects of religion, mythology, or psychology can deny the importance and prevalence of the numbers 7 and 10. They are certainly important when it comes to the occult tradition, as is the number 12. The important discovery concerns how these numbers got to be so prevalent in the world around us. They are to be found in the world around us because they were projected there by the mind of man. The mind projected its own template onto the outer world. As a result, the mind gained needed security. Psychic energy and physical energy harmonized. An interaction between the mental and physical worlds was made possible. In a similar manner, as a projector throws a beam of light onto a screen, casting images that are taken for reality, so has the human mind thrown out its light, its consciousness. The net result was that man attained his being in the world. He cemented himself in his environment and saw that it was good. This is why 3ness, 4ness, 7ness, 10ness, and 12ness are to be found on every level of existence. Consciousness has projected them there. The phenomenal world has subsequently taken on the shape of man's consciousness. And if you go to the text tour page entitled The Division of 10, you'll see many examples we've provided showing the prevalence of the numbers 7 and 12. We now return full circle to the original question of how the divination arts work. How do they reveal what they do about our lives and destinies? We have read a brief description of how human consciousness ascends through the 4 phylogenetic stages and how this process has been commemorated in the great myths of every culture and epoch. We've discovered that this mental template increased or extended to 7, 10, and 12 divisions. This plastic mental template allowed the mind of man to interrelate with reality. In time, the template was projected outward onto the matter or phenomena of the universe. The night sky was the first place to receive man's mental projection. In other words, the zodiac is literally a projection of consciousness. This is the reason why the zodiac incorporates the 3, 4, 7, 10, and 12 templates. These are hallmarks of the zodiac and of the psyche. The former is merely the mirror of the latter. The projection of our psychic architecture gave birth to the zodiac with its 12 signs, 7 planets, 4 elements, and 3 modalities. We have organized external phenomena on the template of the internal world and bonded physical and psychic energy. We have turned our minds inside out, so to speak, in order to feel acclimatized and secure in the universe. The process continued until all external phenomena were circumscribed by the psychic projections. The mind of every infant born partakes of this activity from the moment it enters the world. And because it's all happening subconsciously, the conscious mind ends up thinking that the universe is inherently encoded with the categories it has projected there. This is the reason why it is commonly believed that the zodiac and the planets have some magical effect on consciousness. So now we see that divination is legitimate and possible because both the zodiac and the tarot are founded upon the 3-4 and also the 7 and 12 ratio. The tarot links with astrology, which links directly with consciousness, because all contain the template, the schemata of the 3-4. Therefore, we cannot understand the operations of the zodiac or the tarot without an understanding of mental dynamics. As stated previously, there is a definite 3-4 architecture innate to each of the divination arts. The adepts of old incorporated this particular structure into the divination arts, so they would operate as analogues of human consciousness. If they were not based on the same plastic noetic template as consciousness, they would not yield the accurate information about life and destiny. And let's now see precisely how the 3-4 division is encoded in the zodiac and the tarot. There are actually 3 decks in one. 3 decks in each tarot deck. There's the major arcana of 22 cards, the minor arcana of 40 cards, and that includes the 4 aces, and then there are the court royals, which are 16 in number. And a tarot deck is divided into 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth, or wands, cups, swords, and discs. Let's turn to astrology. In the round art of astrology, we also find these same 4 elements explicitly employed. In conjunction with the 4 elements, we also find what are known as modalities or triplicities. Be sure to consult the table of modalities and triplicities provided on the 3-4 page of the text tour. On that page, we also provide many examples that show how the 3-4 template lies at the basis of so much phenomena in our world. We can now understand why the magician stands at a strange table with 3 legs and 4 square top. From the very first card, we have a cryptic reference to the connection between the divination arts and human consciousness. That card is numbered 1, and that signifies the goal of the magician, which is to bring 4ness to oneness. The card's esoteric letter, as we said, is Beth, which means House of God, which obviously refers to the pyramid that has sides of 3 and a base of 4. The pyramid is Egypt's table, if you will. The magician is its architect. However, he builds not in granite and sandstone. He is an architect of an even greater temple, an inner one, a subtle one, just as precise and just as august as the one in granite which confounds science. The magician is the pharaoh, or Pharos Nous, the enlightened mind. As we have shown, the tarot and astrology are founded upon the 3-4 template. As such, they are intimately connected with the nature of consciousness. The latter can therefore easily be analyzed by way of the divination arts, as has been done for thousands of years. All the rankling and skepticism is without validity. It is the result of little education. The time has come for us to make a reverent return to the great arts that our forefathers created for our benefit. The divination arts are mirrors to our real selves. It's time to dust them off and look deeply into what they reveal. What we find in the zodiac and the tarot is what exists within ourselves.